Double
what do you want to
D,
know?
what's going on, my friend? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you guys. It's been a while.
I like how,
Back from the
Steve,
Arctic.
you'd made fun of me for saying what's going on, but that is slowly becoming your own catchphrase.
It is.
And he says it like it's funny because the last 2 or 3 weeks he says it, and he's trying to get a rise out of me when he says it, and
Actually,
I don't do anything.
I know, actually. So, well, there's a certain cadence to how Ethan does it when he joins and he sees you, because it has to be in this very monotone. What's going on?
Yep.
And then when you ask him, what's going on? He says, not much.
Sounds like my son.
Or nothing much, yeah.
Dean, what are we talking about tonight?
I was thinking of a couple topics today because there's a lot going on in my life. Home-wise and professionally and spiritually. But one thing that I'm sure we can all relate to because we deal with it at work with people, and any job really, is self-awareness.
And my lack thereof.
Well, and everybody, some people lack it, some people have it. How do you develop it? What characteristics make it successful? I am finding that I can really notice the people that have no self-awareness.
Yep.
You know, and I think because I notice them having no self-awareness, it makes me have more self-awareness because I'm like, do I do that? Am I like that? Do I come off that way to people? You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I think. So that's, I don't know, that's just, it's a topic I thought would be interesting to discuss. Like, what do you guys, how often do you run into people that have good or bad self-awareness?
Oh, I mean, it's mostly no self-awareness. Mostly. I mean, I can think of
I would
like
agree.
25 people that we all know that have no self-awareness.
Right.
I would agree. And those that do, it's so incredibly refreshing when they're like, now, there's also the other end of the spectrum, right? Where they have so much self-awareness that they have imposter syndrome. Like, like you are just talking about it where you're like, do I do that? No, you do not.
Yeah, right.
Stop having imposter syndrome right now.
Well, okay, so define imposter syndrome to me, because this is a new term, so I want to make sure I understand it.
That's you do something really well, but you always question whether you do it well or not.
Okay. So it's insecurity, basically.
It could be.
It's like you're, like you feel like you're faking it. Like you're not actually good at it.
Because I've been told I have imposter syndrome about something in the gaming world.
Oh.
Which gaming world?
Oh.
DMing?
Shameless self-plug.
In DMing, I was always asking my group of players, hey, how are things going? I was always asking for feedback. You know, I don't know how this is going. And one guy was just like, dude, you have imposter syndrome. You know, you're worried too much about this. And I think you worry about it sometimes, Dean, where sometimes you have asked me, and I think you did that this week.
Yeah.
Where you were like, man, I don't know if I'm going to get fired for this or not. And about an email, and I go back and I read the email because I hadn't seen it yet. And I read the email and it's like perfectly crafted. It's like, hey, you know, how are we going to
the one today?
This? Yeah. It was
but okay, so maybe that's okay. So now that's I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I think like that when I said I'm going to get fired for this, I was joking, you know. but in the same breath, you know, maybe 80% joking and 20%. Well, you never know. There might be a little sliver of truth.
Yeah, I think 20%. You were like, I wonder how this is going to be taken, and a little bit. I'm like, if I had read this, I'd be like, oh, maybe I need to rethink what I'm doing here. You know, I would never have taken it as. Well,
but I also wouldn't have hit send if there was any real risk to that, or if I cared.
True.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes you're just like, okay, this could be detrimental to my career, but I gotta say it anyway.
Sure.
Although if I don't speak up, this is not going to change.
Right.
Career be damned, you know. but you do temper that. So I'm glad you guys told me what imposter syndrome is, because I really take self-improvement extremely seriously, and I believe that I am a work in progress and always will be till the day that I die. That there's always room for improvement. We are imperfect beings, us humans, right? And I strive for perfection, even though I know I'm never going to get it, right? That being said, a part of continuous improvement to me is to have that feedback loop to make sure, okay, I got to ask myself, am I doing this well? How do I do that? I got to get that opinion from an outsider, because otherwise I can't just count on myself to give me an objective opinion on that, right? I mean, at my age, I'm starting to realize what my flaws are, right? And I also know that I also can't control all of my flaws 100% of the time. It's more part of my persona at work, right? That I try to control certain things and not let them show at work. And at home, I let them out a little bit more because, okay, these are people that have to live with me anyway and need me for support. So they're going to give me a little bit of benefit of the doubt when I break down or when I do something that's, you know, I let my temper go a little bit. It's not horrible, but, you know, enough that I'm like, okay, yeah, that's just dad, you know? So I think imposter syndrome is interesting. You might be pointing to someone though who's always needing self-validation. And there's that fine line between, hey, I want feedback so I can improve, and God, you have no self-confidence whatsoever, or you're trolling for compliments all the time. You know, you got to find that balance in there.
Well, and that's like that when you always need feedback, that's like some people, that's how they get motivated. I wouldn't even call that part of imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Because I've known a couple people that were like that. And then it's funny to watch, like, people who motivate employees that way or other people that way,
right,
and do it. It's wild, right? Because it's like an addiction to both of them.
Yeah. Right.
So self-awareness is more. It's less about asking for feedback and more like being. To me, it's like recognizing how you may come across to other people,
right,
or definitely, you know, was I this way? Like, can I see how somebody would have taken this the wrong way? Something like that.
Right.
Because we've talked about this before, Steve and I, about self-awareness, and it's just like, can you just imagine thinking that you're batting 1,000 for like 2 decades? Like, that's, to me, people who have no self-awareness, that's what they are. They're just like, I am crushing it every single day, year after year after year. I can't imagine thinking that.
Right. I think people that are hypocrites, when you can notice their hypocrisy, lack self-awareness. You know, I mean, there's people that we know that, you know, they'll say one thing out of one side of their mouth and then go do that exact same thing that they say is the wrong thing to do. And then that's just a pointer to me that hypocrisy there just shows, okay, you don't have self-awareness. You don't. That's a good distinction that you draw out there, Ethan, though, is that self-awareness is really about the self. The feedback loop might help build your self-awareness, but it's not the self-awareness itself, right? Yeah, you either have self-awareness or you don't, right? And maybe there's some things you're not sure on, but you build that probably through some feedback, through trusted sources, of course. You know, there's certain people I'm not going to go say, hey, did I do that right? And then there's other people I can say, hey, what did I come across this way? And I trust them to give me an honest answer, because I know they're not going to sugarcoat it to me and say, oh no, you were great. You know, and in the background they're saying, God, that was horrible. That was a train wreck. You know, it's people that I trust to give me an honest opinion and some criticism constructively.
I think self-awareness, like, that's what allows you to take criticism and do something with it, and actually like hear and see. Because that's the other thing. I think these people that don't have self-awareness, they just suffer from paradigm paralysis, and their paradigm just happens to be that they're awesome, and they can't physically see or hear any information, you know, that says otherwise, is what it is. So even if you give them criticism, what's really funny is when they criticize themselves, but they don't even know. Like they have so little self-awareness that they'll say something and it's like, yeah, that was like really a dig on you. I
was talking to someone this week about self-awareness. Somebody who is extremely self-aware, who is it wasn't you, however, it is somebody that I would use a term that you often use, which is a servant leader. This is somebody who is a servant leader. Like, hey, I'm in this role to play this function because I think I do it well and I can help my team. Okay. And I was making the comment that is very rare in America middle management. I think servant leaders are rare. And for a number of reasons. One, I theorize that many people who are servant leaders don't like to be in middle management because it tends to be an area where they're not among people that are like them. Because many people that gravitate into middle management, and right now I'm having middle managers everywhere going, what am I? But a lot of middle managers get there because they want to be upwardly mobile. They want the management position and they want to dictate things because they think they know everything. And they tell people what to do and they're very, very comfortable in that role and they love it and it's great. Hey, I get to tell people what to do and I'm in this position of power. But they have absolutely no self-awareness that sometimes they're very destructive.
Oh, they never know that.
Right. They don't have the self-awareness. They don't know. And I was telling this person, I said, many people in management lack self-awareness. And I'm not saying that's the only demographic. It's just, that's where I see it a lot. And I said, and you can't train self-awareness. And this person's response was classic. This person said, that sort of is counterintuitive that you would need training for self-awareness, right? I don't think you can train that.
Okay, that's a great question, because I was going to ask that. Do you think that it's something that you're born with or that you learn?
I think it's something that you can learn.
Can you learn it from anyone else?
It depends. That's the whole education quandary, which is, are you in the mind space or the head space to be able to learn something? I think it's sort of like, I think I've talked about this before. When I went to school and I did the personality part of one of the classes that I was in, I know I'm the only one that took what I took away from that class, which was the point of that particular piece. The point was to not understand your own personality. It's to understand how to work with people who have other personalities and other communication styles. There were 20 of us. We all went through the same coursework. I know I'm the only one that took that away because I was the only one that was wanting to do that. I was the only one that was paying attention. So, and that's been one of the things about, teaching professionals is, you guys have been through Scrum certifications, and some people are there not taking anything away. They're not learning anything in those courses. But then there are some, if you go to your first one and you do CSM or something like that, and it's this whole new abstract way of thinking. It's an introduction and you're like, oh my gosh, my mind is expanded. Taking some mushrooms or something, right? Self-awareness, it could be, but I think it would be very difficult because I think a lot of people don't necessarily like to look inward. But I think it's a skill that a lot of people have. We've talked, I think the three of us have it. we've talked about it, how you feel, sometimes you feel like really good. You're like, I am crushing it. And then like, it feels like the next day you're like, I fucking suck at my job.
So that is exactly how I feel. Is I feel I go through this curve of I learn a bunch, I get really super confident, and I get overconfident, and then something happens where I'm like, okay, I don't know squat about this, and it takes me down, and I have to like, oh, I need to be a little bit more humble about this. And so I think I go through a cycle of being self-aware and not being self-aware.
I think just having that cycle is self-awareness. I think you're self-aware while you think you're doing really good. Like, I think maybe that's the imposter syndrome creeping in a little bit, where you're just like all of a sudden, because we've talked about this, so I know you feel like this, where it's just like some days you're like, I'm an expert at this thing, I've been doing it for this long, and then other days you're like, I don't think I know anything. It's so weird.
Yep.
I think it could be taught.
Have we successfully derailed your topic of self-awareness, or would you to interject here?
You're right on. I think you're right on. I mean, this is good stuff. Because that was my specific question. I think a case could be made that it's actually a little of both. You know what I mean? That there are some people that have more traits that allow them to be self-aware, that allow them to learn self-awareness. I mean, some people are just cocky. You ever meet someone who's just cocky? And they've been cocky their whole life, and they always will be cocky. Truly, the only way that they're going to not be cocky is if someone takes them down a peg. They have to have a massive failure, right?
That's what I think differentiates those people that don't have self-awareness that do, is because they get taken down a peg and they don't think that they got taken down a peg. Like they don't even
they
understand.
couldn't possibly blame it on themselves.
Right.
You know,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I coach kids in a sport, and there's a select few number of kids that after every game is blaming the ref. Oh, the refs were horrible. The refs lost this game for us. We lost by 28 points, guys. That ain't the refs. And I tell them, and there were games we just get crushed, and that just happens. And I'm just like, when are you going to stop blaming other people and start looking inward? Right now, these are 12-year-old kids. They don't have self-awareness. I think if you do have self-awareness, it certainly doesn't start for a certain age. You got to wait till your brain is fully developed. And what do they say, that is now 25, 26 years old or something like that? Some people might have it sooner and they mature faster, but I also think that sometimes it's learned because it takes an event. It takes some sort of shaming or humbling, because humility is required for self-awareness. Humility is required, right? So it takes some sort of event that humbles you to realize, well, you know what? Maybe I don't know it all.
They call them crucible moments.
Yeah. Another great word, crucible moments. Imposter syndrome and crucible moments. I'm going to write that down. I have two things.
So I have a question about those who sort of refuse to get into that moment of self-awareness. And I'm wondering, it's a theory, it's a working theory. Those who want to continue to believe that they are all that in a bag of chips rarely step out of the areas in which they are an expert, or have a reasonable set of knowledge, because they want to be the expert. So they don't step into other areas because they don't want to be the non-expert. They don't want to be told how it really works. And the reason I say that is I've seen this in our industry oftentimes, and it's usually, I would offer, it's usually men in their 20s, what I call the rutting season, or somebody new joins an organization and they feel they need to tell and show everyone the size of their antlers. So they will only talk about the technology they know. And if somebody says, oh, hey, but what about this other thing? Do you have any experience there? It is the next thing is a completely dismissive remark about that. Oh no, let me tell you about this stuff that I know, and let me focus the conversation on this thing in which I'm an expert.
I've seen that. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think there's another case too where some people that lack self-awareness aren't restricting themselves to just this area, but they pretend, and quite frankly just bully their way through it, right? That kind of gets to the cocky, because I know I have a family member, I'm not going to say what relation, that nothing's ever going wrong. They always know everything about everything. And I don't know if it's that they truly don't have any self-awareness, or they do, they just don't want to admit it. You know what I mean? That's not their persona, use that word again, that they use. Then maybe on their own, in their bedroom at home, they're crying themselves to sleep every night and going through their list of faults. I don't know. I doubt that. But on the surface, they look like everything's going perfectly and they're in charge and they are expert at everything. I think those are fewer than what you're talking about, though, Steve. I think I've seen more people like what you're talking about, where it's they stay in their lane, but they poo-poo anything that's outside of their lane. At least that's my experience.
I see with our space specifically, so not like our industry, but our space specifically, because of the pragmatic way that you train those, I'm gonna air quote skills, because they are skills, but a lot of these dopes don't get it and they're not actually doing anything. They think that they know. So and this is like for our stuff specifically, so they know the rules, but they don't understand the foundation. They don't understand the principles, to use it like the actual word. They don't understand how these processes came about, because they don't and so then they don't know what to do when it breaks, but they think that they know what to do. And so in my experience, which is why I've walked away from using like real specific terminology, is because all they want to do is like quibble about terminology, and I'm like, I don't you can call it whatever you want. We're talking about the same thing. I don't care. But it is irritating to kind of get into it with them. I've worked with people that are on, we talked about teams the last 2 weeks, and I'm just killing Steve with my doubling down on the whole team thing sucks, but there are people that are on the team that are a threat to the team because of that. And it's like they have no self-awareness, that they have no clue that what they're talking about is wrong. They think that they need to do, I'm not sure, they think they need to do everything. They think they know everything, even though they don't.
So that begs the question, what are the benefits of self-awareness? And what are the repercussions of the lack thereof?
I think the repercussions are not for you. The repercussions are for everybody else. Because like you don't even know, since you don't know that you suck, like there's no skin off your back. But everybody else suffers. So the place that we were all at together, there's one particular person who was that middle layer who had no self-awareness about anything and made poor decisions all the time and blew everything up and made everybody's life miserable all the time. But they were not bothered by anything. And those of us that have self-awareness, we don't put up with that stuff.
or we do put up with it and just suffer through it. Because you see it and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. What? But you have no power over it because you can't train anybody to have it. Or I know exactly what you're talking about. But I think everybody suffers around that. But what are the benefits if you do have it? Like, what would be if somebody doesn't have it and you said, hey, I don't know if you've noticed this. Let's say you were trying to train somebody. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I don't think it's trainable, but what if you did? How would you encourage someone to be more self-aware? What would be the carrot?
I can't tell you the carrot, but I could tell you the stick. The stick is that we have to put you someplace where you're less harm to a team, like you're on a different team or you're on support or something like that. I think in today's world where teams are becoming more and more important and highly functioning teams at that, I mean, there were days where people would you'd be given a task and you'd just go do, and you'd come back and bring it back, you know, a generation ago, maybe even in more recent history. And there still are roles like that, but they're few at most companies, right? I can think of one person at our current client, Steve, that we often have to test their own stuff because no one else knows how to do it. That is really in that role where they're a team of one, right? We also call them subject matter experts, right? You can have a perfectly functioning career doing that. It's just that means whenever there's a team aspect to it, you're left out. And not everybody wants that. And let's be honest, there are some people that are curmudgeonly and really have no business being on a team because they're not a team player, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that means that you have pigeonholed yourself and you're not going to get growth opportunities, right? So maybe I've found the carrot, and the carrot is that in order to get growth opportunities and opportunities to advance and gain new skills and be on cool stuff, you have to be a team player. You have to function well on a team, because we're not going to have you be a crappy team player and then give you over into this other team that does something even more important and makes even more money, and you poison that team. That's not how it works. That's a bad idea from a leadership perspective, because why would we add someone who really does a good job but is going to tank the whole team? I used to say this back when I was a manager. I said, I would much rather have a team of all C-level players than have one A player who makes everybody else feel like an F. Because it tanks the whole team. It demotivates everybody. Where I could take a team of C-level players and get them all working together and probably bring them all up to a B. You know, sometimes they drop, the other people pick them up. It raises the level of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Collaboration. And that does require pretty much everybody on that team to have some level of self-awareness. I mean, there's people that are really high on that scale, but then there's people that don't have any. And at least if you have some, you know.
So the teaching, in my experience, what I've done is not teach self-awareness directly, like not say that you have to do this thing. It's more working with them when you're in a leadership role and trying to figure out what their goals are and how you can help them achieve them. And yeah, I've worked with people that have self-awareness issues, but have never been like, hey, you need to like look at the way that you're coming across. And I've never actually addressed it directly. It's more giving them a safe place and figuring out what their goals are, even if their goals are not where they're currently at, which is totally fine. But being that kind of like turning into a friend, but more just supporting what it is they want to do, has changed and has, for some weird reason, given them more self-awareness.
I think the 360 review process is actually designed to try to give people self-awareness. It's just very few people take it that way. there's so many people that look at their reviews and say, oh, who said that and who said that, and I know who said that, and versus, okay, it doesn't matter who said what. Someone perceived this. This is their perception. And you have to ask yourself, well, okay, is there a way that I could have done that or given someone the perception that I was doing that? If I do a little self-inventory and say, nah, that was a misinterpretation and I don't do this, and this is someone with an axe to grind, then I'll do that. But if I'm honest with myself and say, okay, well, this is something maybe I could work on, I'm probably giving someone a misperception. That's my self-awareness. But that's the end of the 360 review process, right? That should be the outcome for the person that's getting reviewed. Problem is, a lot of managers don't want to give anybody negative feedback, and people don't want to leave negative feedback, even if it's worded as constructively as possible. People get offended.
Well, so like you have self-awareness, so that's what you do with that information, right? It's like, I'm sure I do the same thing.
Right.
Steve, I'm sure you do the same thing. Like I purposely ask for people that I know maybe don't get along with me to see what their feedback is, to be like, are they really out there in left field? Like, or do they have something constructive that like I can maybe change? And yeah, if you get something that's negative, like you have to evaluate, and usually not like right away. It's like usually a long period of time that you think about that and try and figure out. The other point that you made about taking someone that's crappy and putting them somewhere out, and they shouldn't do that, but that's exactly what they do. That's exactly how it works. Like,
you mean in another team?
Yeah, that's it. Like, and I think maybe Steve, we talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago, where it's like I've been at places where they're like, well, these two people work really well together, let's split them up, and then by osmosis they will make everybody better. And I'm like, whoa, have you ever thought that maybe they only work well together because they're together, and if you break it up it's all going to fall apart? And they're like, oh no. I'm like, I would recommend you don't change anything.
Yeah, they're thinking it works like a Breck commercial, and
Yeah.
they tell two friends and they tell two friends,
and
no,
so
doesn't work
on
that way.
and so on.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
We're gonna multiply the goodness. No. You're breaking up the Beatles is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is the people who come up with that decision, like, I don't know what they know about, like, they know nothing about people. Nothing. And they shouldn't be in a position of managing people if they come up with that as the idea.
They would be better off by if they're trying to grow talent and grow great teams, by putting people on with that team and then cycling them off. You know what I mean?
Yep. Hey, learn how to do it.
Yeah. Mentorship.
How you're supposed to act.
Yep.
And Steve,
you mentioned team factory.
You mentioned earlier about you seeing a lot of people, at least in our industry, who are in that middle management space that are atrocious. That is not limited to our industry. That is like a trend right now for some reason, which is blowing my mind, because it's just, they're like the most toxic, uneducated, unqualified people that they have put, and they're using tactics that millennials and Gen Z do not put up with. Like they use the manipulation, and it's really funny. So I'm a millennial and I'm over all that stuff, so I'm not going to put up with that crap anymore. And that's what I teach my kids who are Gen Z and Gen A. They're not going to put up with it. So my kid they come home and tell me what's going on. I'm like, this is what they're doing, and this is how you combat that, right? You put everything back on them. They're like, well, they made us sign that. I'm like, don't sign it. What are they going to do? Write you up? I would love to see that write up. Well, they said it's because of this reason. Prove it. Show me where. Show me the documentation that says before you say anything. It blows my mind.
I think there's a reason why they do that. I have a friend with an experience kind of like that. He's a little older than his middle managers. It's at a company that obviously shall not be named, but they're getting that direction from upper management. So upper management puts people in at the middle management level that they can control and manipulate. They might not be the most skilled people at that level that are really functioning outside of that level. So you can hold their feet to the fire and make them do what you want them to do, because they don't really have the skills to go anywhere else.
And they're beholden to you. They're your ally.
promote them beyond their competence, and then now you have an ally for life as long as they're in that position.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is it's toxic leadership that are putting these douchebags in place.
Yeah.
So this is my favorite thing about how toxic this particular place is, which is not a place that I'm at, but it was one of these middle managers openly saying to employees, "We can treat you like garbage because we pay you more than minimum wage." Like, said out loud. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm like, I don't think I've ever met anybody that has that little skill who's in any kind of manager role.
Wow.
Blows my mind. But then the other thing is, that's why there's been this shift in professionals to say leadership rather than management, which to me has devalued the word leadership entirely because of that. Also, you like servant leadership. I cringe at that. I know that you guys are using it correctly, but it's like that word is like 10 years played out.
Hey,
sorry.
If you go to dictionary.com, pal, the definitions are played out in about 30 seconds, man.
So what you're saying is we need to pivot away from that term?
Yeah, pivot. Yes, that was all the rage 10, 20 years ago, servant leadership.
But it's an actual thing, you know. Right.
I'm very aware that it's an actual
and
thing.
there's a real definition behind it, right?
I know, I know exactly what it is.
So what's the new term for it now then?
I don't think there is a term for it now.
Oh, we just can't talk about it.
I think it's just that the people who aren't servant leaders are using the term.
Yeah, people who aren't, because they say I'm a servant leader, and it's like the golden rule, like you can't say you're the thing because that automatically makes you not the thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I am so humble.
Is that a skit or something? I feel like that's a skit. Or we've talked about that at least once before. I'm the most humble. I'm the most humble person. That's giving me 45 vibes. I gotta stop. That might be what I'm thinking of.
So why do you think they've drifted away from just using the term management and gone to leadership?
Because I think management is kind of like a derogatory. It's like an unskilled, unprofessional, supervisor.
Like negative connotations to it.
Yeah, I think so. It's like used car salesman or car salesman. Like, people for a long time they didn't want to be called that because it was bad. But there are people
are avoiding terms because of the way the wind is blowing currently. I just didn't know if it was like, hey, well, I'm not really management. I'm higher up than that. Because management is technically a role, and maybe a VP. Are they really management? No, I'm not managing people anymore. I'm on strategy, that type of thing too, that's beneath them to say that.
And I think maybe the thing that bothers me about the overuse of leadership is that it's still within that formal hierarchy. Like that's the only time it's ever used. Unless you're have like 2 to 5 years of experience and have a master's and are applying for an entry-level job and you have to lead by without authority or whatever that nonsense is that people are talking about in jobs. Yes.
Yeah, that's out of PM school. Straight out of PM school.
PM school.
Yeah, that's what I call it. Yeah, I remember that. It was the biggest downer you ever heard. Get a lead based on influence, not on authority. Oh, okay. That's really hard. It's really hard, Or having all kinds of accountability with no authority. Nope. Okay. It's a very difficult position to be in. But plenty of people that do that.
I feel like that's all I've ever done. Like, yeah. I feel like, that's what we do. I'm including you two in that when I say I've ever done too. Yeah. That's all that it is.
Yeah. Agreed.
But we're still killing it.
Yeah.
Every day.
every day or every other.
There is not a moment that passes where I am not killing it.
Right.
Killing it with humility.
So what else about self-awareness? Trying to think. There was another point I had. I asked my question. I don't know. Is it an overhyped term?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it's overhyped, but what I think is there are certain organizations that where the culture penalizes you for having it.
Care to unpack that for us, Steve?
Dude, I think it is rough to be an employee, period, right now. Like, I think everybody that's like line level, so like anybody that's not in like middle management or management is just getting, it just seems like everybody's just getting railed right now.
I say that based on an organization that I used to work for quite a few years ago, where if you were not actively being an ass to everybody and demanding top performance and demanding perfection, or the other thing is, if you were just quiet, you would be rewarded for those two behaviors: quietly adhering to whatever was pushed at you, or if you were actively being demanding things. That was what was rewarded. So the people who were self-aware and like, nah, I think we should be doing it this way, this is going to work better long term for long-term success. No, that was a recipe for you to be miserable and to be demoted and to be put in a corner. Like, hey, go over here.
How long do you think it's been like that, and do you think that it has been consistently like that?
In that organization, a very long time, based on what I knew. I wasn't there for more than 5-6 years, but from everything I heard from others, it was crazy. And like, so there was a team of people brought in to help with this one product, and they basically got enough people in the door, new people, to kind of help with things, and they started bringing in others, recruiting others to help with this. And I was one of those recruited. Hey, come in and help with this. And the culture breeded everyone that was brought in to leave. All gone within 5 years. And what I hear from the people that are still there that know enough, they're like, everyone is like, oh my gosh, what did we do? We had such a great team when they were here and we didn't know it. But that's only because it just got worse when everybody left.
I was just going to say, it's actually amazing that they recognize that. I feel like most places, they wouldn't even recognize that things were good.
Well, I don't know that everybody recognizes it, but enough people were like, oh shit, what did we do?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because my naive mind tends to think that when economic times are good and the market is bad for employees, the treatment gets worse just because they can, right? Where are you going to go? Versus when it's really hard to get employees, they treat their employees better. Now, I don't know that that's how it's been flowing for a while, because I kind of felt like I was, working in 08, 09 when they had that economic downturn, and the company I was at laid a bunch of people off. And that was when we heard, hey, do more with less. And we're at the new normal. Sound familiar? All those buzzwords come out. But it seemed like we got out of that, at least as for the industry that we're in. And it didn't seem to take a super long time before people could there were more jobs, right? And in IT, the space that we're in, Mark, there, that market has always been good, right? Even through economic downturns.
Yeah. I think what we've seen is because I've lived, that one's the only one I lived through. I assume you guys may have lived through some other ones. I can't remember when the big ones were before that, but
back in 1944.
Yeah, like 08 to 11 or whatever. It's it's funny because it's like, millennials that are 5 years younger than me didn't experience that. Like, so, and that's where, like I went through that. We have, the three of us have, because we had to deal with that where there are no jobs. Like, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
This whole idea that you stay at a place forever is because that's what it was. That's not the case anymore. But now I think we're seeing, I think for a little while, maybe people were treated better. And maybe like at the, when the Great Resignation was taking place, I think maybe people were being treated better. But now what I think's happening is there are so many jobs that they're just not filling them, and they're just making people do the work anyway. And they're lowering salaries. So now what I've heard, it's crazy. I've heard that, millennials and Gen Z with master's degrees, being offered like $40K for like an entry level role when they have like 5 years of experience. Like, it's insane what some of these employers are doing. It seems like there's maybe even certain industries where they do that. They're just like, yeah, we're not going to backfill it. And they don't care. Like, they don't care if there's one person that can do three people's job and then they leave, because they may not backfill that person at all. Even though people would like to think, well, they're going to have to hire three people to backfill me. And if they would have just paid me the salary that I asked for, they would have gotten a better deal than having to hire three people to do the job that I was doing. I don't necessarily know that's happening all the time, though.
Well, maybe what my question was more about, is it cyclical or is this really evolution? It's going to continue to change in that direction. Hey, treat your employees poorer. We're going to automate stuff, or we're just going to plain not do it, or we're going to have people do more. And if they get burned out, they get burned out. Let them go.
It's a revolution, not evolution. I don't know. Well, let's see here. Evolution stronger. That's what Riker said, right? This is evolution, not revolution, and no force in the universe can stop evolution. Is that what it was? That's the one where they crash landed on the one where all the women were big and all the men were small. And there was like this like there was this
We're
this
at
like
Next
shuttle.
Generation
Yes.
now? Oh
Yeah,
my
this-
god, that
the
was
shuttle-
I didn't even catch that.
The
segue.
shuttle had crash landed on the planet where the men were big, and like the ladies that were in charge of the planet were like ready to flip on what was going on with the misogyny and the patriarchy and everything, and they were like losing their minds. And at the end, they were gonna kill a dude or whatever. And Riker had, it's one of my favorite lines that he ever said. I was hoping Steve was gonna be right there with it, because he has before.
I know, and I'm thinking about it. I just had imposter syndrome about the fact that I don't remember this episode. I pride myself on my TNG expertise, and right now you have brought me down a peg, and I now have an incredible amount of self-awareness about the fact
my theory is. Go ahead.
I don't know everything about TNG.
My theory is that Steve's whole TNG expertise is really just a persona.
Could be.
Way better than my persona, which is casual watcher. That's it.
That's
But
okay.
at least I caught the reference. It took me a while.
Yeah.
He's talking
Yep.
Riker, and I'm like, what? Oh, what?
Yeah.
And so I think I agree. Yeah, it's one of those two things. It feels like both, maybe. Definitely
Yeah.
feels like a little bit of a revolution. I was watching somebody on TikTok and they'd made the comment. They're like they grew up in the punk scene and all these different scenes, and they're pretty far left. It's pretty funny. And so she'd come on one day on one of her videos, and she's like, anybody who has like a left-leaning podcast, how do you feel? She's talking about men specifically. She's like, and that's not what this is, but She's like, so how do the males who have like a leftist podcast feel about the woman who does the skits about like Veronica and Susan doing more for workers' rights than they ever will? It's like this. It's the funniest stuff that this lady does. They're all real. Like that's a huge thing on like TikTok too. Is like, people kind of replaying things that happened to them at their places of work, and hers is just like this. It's spot on, like just dead on, and it just keeps going. It's hilarious.
That's bold to replay things that happen at your work. I don't know that I could necessarily do that without a certain amount of the veil.
Yeah.
They don't use names and stuff. I have seen instances where I think like people saw it. I have seen at least 2 instances where people were doing it about their current workplace and somebody saw it and then they got fired for it.
Yeah.
Which it's not like they were doing anything bad. They just, I don't know, the business, they're just being douches.
Yeah, I think all you got to do is offend the right people, and it'll get back. Whether someone that if you're doing it about work, someone who knows you from your past or whatever, it'll get back. It's just got to tick off the right people. I'm with Steve. It's not a good idea. I need more of a veil. Oh, that's right. The camera's on. Oh, dang it. No, I don't know. I don't know whether it's evolution or revolution either, Ethan. I don't know for sure. I'm just trying to figure out if is it something that's, hey, it's just something we have to deal with the ebbs and flows, or wait a minute, this is as good as it's going to get. In fact, it's going to get worse. And I don't necessarily care for myself, because eventually I'm going to get out of this. Eventually, I feel like I got a lot of gas in the tank yet, but my kids, they're just starting this, you know. Fortunately, my one has a great employer, enjoys her job, and shows all the signs of being very good, a very good employer that nurtures employees and builds them up. Great culture. The others are not in yet, so they don't know.
I think that's what'll happen is like there will be places that they will only want to hire people like them, and those people are leaving the workforce year over year.
Yeah.
And so they will die. Like those places that are toxic and that want to behave, they will go away because no one will go work for them.
Yep.
Is what'll happen.
Yeah, well, and that's been going on since the dawn of time too, hasn't it? I mean, there's always been improvements in the workplace, and the grass is always greener, and people are the one thing that works against companies like that is the attitude of the people that are working. You know, our parents' generation, you'd go work someplace and stay there forever.
Yep.
With our generation, company loyalty, let's be honest, it only exists to an extent, right? I mean, if I feel like I'm being abused, I'm confident enough in my skills that, you know, 401k and investment and stuff like that and seniority be darned, I'm going to go someplace else.
Well, and that the younger like Gen Z and younger millennials, like there is no loyalty. Yeah. They have watched Gen X and the older millennials like get screwed by, there is no reason to be loyal. It doesn't benefit. Right. That's what they've seen. So yeah, they have no loyalty.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that it's certain cases they've seen that. You know, it's not always that way. I think there are companies that do legitimately say, this is an investment in our future. There's just fewer and farther between that they have those, right? Or they'll invest in their future up to a certain level, and then once you hit the glass ceiling, well, now there's nowhere to go, and you got to move out to move up, if that's what you want to do. I also think that there's more people that are like, maybe aren't as upwardly mobile. Maybe they don't care. You know, do I care if I want to get into leadership? Maybe not. And maybe that's something where you hit an age where you realize that. I mean,
no,
I had a taste of it, didn't like it, fine where I'm at.
No, that's another thing that about them too, is like they don't care.
Yeah.
It's they've seen, And there's one organization, this is a retail organization, and I think most of them are like this. So there's this really weird, you got your line people, and then you have like the supervisor, lead, like middle management, and then you have like your salaried style team lead thing, and then maybe you have like one or two like directors, and then the store manager or whatever. And in between the line level and that like lead role, there's this unpaid promotion thing that exists that they do. So it's like they take people that they maybe want to promote, or in my opinion, they're manipulating them to do more work for no more money.
They want to exploit.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. So like when one of my kids was having that thing, I'm like, don't do that. I'm like, if they ask you to do more work, or they're asking you to do work that's somebody else's responsibility, they have to show you that you're going to get paid for and show you that that's in your job description. So it's not only have they figured that out themselves, but they're also being taught to not do that, because we were burned by it.
Yeah.
So I think they don't care. Like, I think that they don't buy into capitalism as much because they've seen the damage that it can do. So I think that they're going to be much more fiscally responsible than any other generation before them. And I don't think they need as much. So their ambitions they just haven't seen, and we haven't seen the ROI. And I think they have not seen the ROI on it as well. And that's part of what the Great Resignation was, is people were like, wow, I'm working really hard and I don't care about this anymore. I care about these other things, and I can't do these other things while I'm still here. So I'm going to go do something else that takes up less of my time.
I'd be very interested in the statistics on the Great Resignation, because I know it was a big number, but I also know a ton of people that just use it as a career change. I mean, and not even actually a job change, not necessarily a career change. Lateral move someplace else, wasn't necessarily the whole deep thinking, I'm going to go get out of the rat race type of thing. I know a lot of people that just, hey, I'm going to go change jobs.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a big part of it. But I think there were a lot of people that were like reevaluated. I mean, it's everything that works. We talked about quiet quitting and how that's the wrong term and everything, but it's like, this all stems from that. It's like people reevaluated their priorities, and they're like, well, this isn't a priority, and I haven't seen a return on my investment in time, so I'm going to stop that and put my time where I want to be spending it.
Yeah. Assuming they get to a job that they don't have to do the same.
Yeah.
because I know you're saying, hey, you point back to the job description. If you're like me and have actually read and written job descriptions, they're intentionally vague. And there's a little phrase in there that says, and other duties as requested. That's used in there all the time.
Yep.
Most job descriptions, in my opinion, are junk. They rarely tell you exactly what you're going to be doing. And they're vague enough to loop in everything they want you to do anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, if you push back, it's interesting because there's this influx of them trying to manipulate and exploit. And then when you push back and you don't respond to the fear mongering, because that's exactly what it is, it's fear mongering. And when you don't respond to that, they have no other tools, because they're uneducated in how to deal with people and how to lead people, or even how to manage people, let's be fair, or supervise. They can't even do that. And so it all goes away. I know of an example where, this is a place where you have to punch a clock. And so the standard operating procedure, SOP, for those that don't know, anything after 6 minutes is a violation, and you could be written up for anything after 6 minutes. But prior to that, you cannot be written up for it, because it's not a violation. And so this particular person, it's like, a few times a week, like 2 or 3 minutes after the start of their scheduled shift or something, and their like lead person, the person that was above them that actually got paid money, was like, if you do it again, I'm gonna write you up. And it's like, they did it again and they didn't get written up because they can't get written up for it because it's not a violation.
Is that so? That violation thing, because I punched a clock at one point in time, but it's years ago. Who establishes that? Is that some universal rule someplace?
It's
or-
a corporation, so that's
at
what's
that company. Okay.
yeah, that's what's great about
Okay.
like companies
Yeah.
is that they have they have to have guidelines for all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Right.
So like, yeah, their policy is like anything after 6 is a violation, you can get written up for it. But
Right.
so that means that anything before you can't get written up for it because it's not a
Right.
violation.
Right.
But then you got this dope who's in this role who doesn't even understand how their company works and is trying to fearmonger people, and they're like, well, I'm gonna write you up because you're 2 minutes late.
Doesn't research the actual bylaws.
Yeah, and it's like, well, first of all, I was walking from my car to here, so F off.
Nice.
But then, so that happened, and then it goes away. There's nothing else is said about it because, you know, they realized that there wasn't anything they could do about it, and they got called on it. Yeah. Well, we're just very topical right now. Do you have any other ideas for tonight?
I think this is a long topic. I think this was pretty good.
We've talked about it before.
I have more
yeah.
for the future. It depends on what I need in therapy on. I'll just kick back on the couch and tell you about my life.
This is the Durwood couch experience.